Jeff Ogilvie survives Wingfoot.
Now the moment Aaron Badley has waited for.
Gary Webb is the 5-time Australian Open champion.
Golf at its best by one of the best in golf, Peter Thompson.
Stand in front of a crowd like this today and win the PGA Championship is pretty special.
He's done it at last. Greg Norman.
Matt Jones gets his name on the Stonehaven Cup.
Leashman to 11 under. Now we've got a new leader, kids.
There it is, Adam Scott, a life changer.
Coming up next, you have unrestricted access to golf across Australia and the world. Thanks to Golf Australia, we're going inside the ropes. Subscribe now on iTunes or your favourite podcast app, or head to golf.org.au.
G'day everybody, welcome to Inside the Ropes, episode number 44, and what does promise to be a pretty spirited edition, I must say. Andy Maher here, with a couple of the stalwarts. Mark Hayes, of course. Hello, Hazy.
Hello, Murray. I'm pumped because I reckon the boys from the magazines are going to go nuts today.
Well, to flag what's happening in about 10 minutes time.
Well, this is one of the big additions that we've been sort of talking about on Twitter in particular, but the bosses of the rankings sections from the two key magazines in Australian Golf, Golf Australia Magazine and Australian Golf Digest, are coming in, and they're going to go toe-to-toe about their rankings and probably sit here and field a few questions that they didn't really want to answer, the curly ones, about what people think and what we think about the great courses in Australia and those who don't make the list.
I think most of the pressure being borne upon Steve Kipert and Brendan Jones when they come in will be coming from our third member of the team today, Mike Clayton, who I suspect you don't, hello to you, I suspect you don't have as much, I won't say interest, but as regard, what's the right word for how you feel about top 100s in golf course magazines? Golf magazines.
I was a part of the panel for a long time.
You were, yeah.
When they've got a place, I mean, as Peter Thompson said a long time ago, so I've never seen a list I agree with. And I never have, but unsurprisingly, I mean, most people have their own lists and prejudices and passions and views on where golf courses should sit. But
that's true, and also not everyone can get to play every course, so how
That's
can you
right.
possibly rank all the great courses in Australia?
I like Tom Doak's book the best, and when it comes to ranking golf courses, he gives them marks between 0 and 10. So he puts them in categories, which is a much better way than having to say that Metropolitan's a better course than Lake Karrinyup. Or I'm not interested in, they're both what in Doak's book they would be both 6s or 7s. That's what they would be. They lists tend to be so polarising when people start arguing about whether such and such a course is better than the other course. When the courses in Australia fall into 4 or 5 pretty distinct categories, really.
Should be a great debate.
It should be. Congratulations to your golf course, by the way, Hazy, which gets into which mag's top 100 for the first time? I can't remember.
Into Australian Golf Digest. We're talking about Curlewis Golf
Correct.
Club on the mighty Bellarine Peninsula, and into the Australian Golf Digest top 100 for the first time, and it's back for a third time in Golf Australia magazine. So pretty proud of a country course punching above its weight, and yeah, I've got to put the disclaimer that I'm a member, and also that Clayton here is the overseeing architect of the course. But I think it's come on leaps and bounds.
One course, and we'll spend more time talking about all this with the boys. But one course gets into the top 10 in both hundreds as a new entry. So there's one debutant into the rankings that forced its way into the top 10 straight away, and that's Ocean Dunes. Fairly rated, do you think?
I haven't played it.
Okay. Have you been down there yet, Hazy?
No, I've never been.
Can we get down? Can we get your boss John Sutherland? We need to get down to King Island and spend a week down. We can do a show from down there. Well, we need to play at least each course.
I'm going to consume in a week.
On King Island.
Yeah, you do.
No, we don't.
You don't have to play golf every day.
Spend a week on King
No,
Island.
you do. I think you do.
Clayton might have spent a week there one night.
I love King Island. King Island's a great place. The Curry Pub. On a Sunday arvo when the footy's on, the House of Stoush, all the boys who have been working on the farms, they get 6 hours off a week. They come into the pub.
We can do Barnbougle. We can Barnbougle and King Island in a week. I can do that, but I'm not doing King Island.
Well, you can come down for 3 days, Hazy, and I'll stay the week. We'll eat the fish pies and all sorts of stuff while we're down there, and all that cheese, Hazy. The cows are big down on King Island.
The brie.
It has a Fanta in King Island. They got Fanta down
They're going to get it soon.
It's not
but
Fanta.
I'll overlook the Fanta in favour of the brie.
Right. Okay, a couple of things we need to tick off before we get to the boys and talk about the top hundreds. Mark Leishman, I think we had, after 61, we had pretty high hopes.
Yeah.
On a golf course, I'm keen to get your thoughts on, Clates. I know how much you know about it, but Matt Kuchar certainly had something to say about it after the opening round. And rightfully, I reckon he got a fair clip for saying what he said.
Well, I've played that course quite a bit, and it's tremendous.
Looks great on TV.
Great.
This is
Fantastic course.
Trinity Forest in
Forest,
Dallas.
yes. It's a Corin Crenshaw course built on an old dump site. They did a brilliant job, but wide fairways, big greens, lots of strategy, all the things I like that the average tour player mightn't like, because he thinks that the average fairway should be 30 yards wide and you should be taught to hit the ball between the goalposts, and if you miss the goalpost, you get punished. So it's not that sort of golf course. I hope it doesn't get judged because a low score won it.
Nah.
But
Surely it can't,
great fun to watch, interesting golf. The tour needs more of that stuff. It was a tremendous golf course.
And no surprise that the guys who grew up playing bouncy courses where you had to choose your line of approach actually shone through. And not only the Australians, and talking Aaron Wise, the eventual champion,
Who won at Royal Melbourne.
who won at Royal Melbourne in 2016 at the Master of the Amateurs. And you know, he obviously is South African born, not that he played a lot of golf there, but he just appreciates global golf and the complexities outside the dartboard rubbish in the US.
Should it be called a links course?
No, a links course is on the land that links the beach to the farmland.
So is there such thing as a links style course? What do you call it?
No.
So what do you call this?
It's either a links course or it's not. It's a course in a dump in Dallas.
But so you can't call it a dump course. Like, what do you call it?
Why do you have to?
I don't know. You know, you don't have to call it anything. You're right.
There's so many elements of Australian golf about it. You went over the backs of the greens, shaven banks that ran the ball away, short grass is a hazard, wide fairways, windy, strategy. It was like playing golf in Australia. So not one Australian who played Trinity Forest would think a second thing of it. Yet we didn't get that job. We almost got that job. And Mike Wright, the pro at Shady Oaks, where we're going to start work next year, so you guys are lucky you didn't get that job, because if you got that job and built that golf course, you never would have got another job in America. And that's the exact golf course we would have built.
Wow.
Because the reaction was in America was, what is this thing?
That's incredibly sad,
isn't it?
And I heard this great story on another podcast you do with Rod Morey and Jeff Ogilvy, and how the players were talking a year in advance, or the caddies rather were talking a year in advance. Last year between the Byron Nelson and the Colonial, they sent, because it was, it's obviously in the Texas area, they let the caddies go and play that course on the Monday and came back, and they all reported, according to the what's State of the Game's the podcast, isn't it?
State of the Game.
The State of the Game podcast. Jeff Ogilvy said all the caddies reported, this is a disgrace. My boss isn't going to like this. It's going to be bad. It's going to be this, that, and the other. And that was, the feedback that the players all first heard of this new course. And I think, there are obviously the Matt Kuchars in the world, but I think the overwhelming sentiment from the players who did play last week was that it was a really good addition to the tour and something different.
So what does it do to the status of that tournament and that course's hold long-term on a position on a tour like the PGA when a senior statesman of the tour like Kuchar comes out and says what he says? Does it harm it at all, or does it harm Kuchar?
No, I think for every Kuchar there was an Ogilvy saying the complete opposite.
Yeah,
and I think if there's not a great respect for Bill Craw and Ben Crenshaw and the work they do on the US tour, there ought to be. I mean, they don't play many of those Craw and Crenshaw courses, but those guys have done some amazing work. So I think it's a good thing for the tournament. It's a good thing for the tour. It's a good thing for golf. All positive about that golf. And they were. I mean, the owner was so worried about the feedback from the caddies and things he'd heard that Jeff went out and did a bunch of videos for him, which you can find on YouTube, where he was explaining the strategy of the holes and how the golf course worked and how you'd have to think your way through it. And it's a brilliant course, I think.
Isn't that amazing? That's like a PGA Tour led. Almost propaganda response to criticism from effectively a bunch of caddies. It's an extraordinary thing.
Unbelievable.
Well, no, not so much. No, but there were lots of people in Dallas who thought it was a bad golf course, not just the caddies.
I get that, but you know what I mean? It's an extraordinary thing that even has to happen. But thank God that it does, and thank God for Jeff Ogilvy.
But they're so used to seeing what their perception of a good golf course looks like.
Yeah.
Here's a golf course with no trees, bouncy, big wide fairways, no rough, bouncy, quirky greens, what they would think of as unfair bounces, but just regular bounces on.
Of course.
Any sort of links course, they would just be a normal bounces.
Well,
and windy.
Well, it sort of returned to normal for them on the last day. Rain delayed. The thing had copped a heap of water, so there was no run out on drive. So it was even more comfortable for the commentators. You could hear, he's carried at 290, no run out. They kind of reverted to normal. It was back within their kind of comfort zone.
And they could predict the shots that were about to be played.
Exactly. Yeah. And they were kind of freaking out about, some of the ball flights that Leishman was executing in the first, and the Australians particularly who were there about
bouncing the ball back to the
flag. You saw the Pro Tracer. It comes out low. Like normally they're hitting 60-degree wedges and it's going sort of up into the orbit. He's hitting these knockdown little 8-irons that are kind of low runners, and they're going, hey, that's ended up close. It's like, what is he playing shots like that for?
And the standouts in the commentary on that of Ian Baker Finch and I think Frank Nobilo in the first couple of days, like they've seen it all before.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there was nothing there that would have even turned an eye at an Australian Open or
no. Well, not an Australian Open. Yeah, traditional Australian Open. Thanks.
Well, let's get to the golf, Andy. I mean, no surprise to see such a phenomenal series of results for the Australians, although the three top ones, although they're in the top 13, have each got their own share of heartbreak. So Mark Leishman, obviously the obvious one at finishing second, having led for so long in the tournament. But Adam Scott and Matt Jones both had just agony, sort of in agony in inverted commas, because clearly it's not, in the big scheme of life.
That's right, yeah.
But, Adam Scott was the classic. He birdied the last hole, the 72nd hole, to suddenly be in a tie for sixth, needing no worse than a two-way share of ninth to get into the top 60 in the world and avoid US Open qualification hassles. And then slowly but surely the rest of the field knocked him back down a peg or two, and right down to the last couple of groups he was outside, and then he suddenly was in a three-way tie for ninth. So he is one share of ninth place away from being safe for the US Open. So it doesn't get much closer than that.
Yeah, that does hurt.
And the other one, of course, was Matt Jones, who was in the top 10 and would have guaranteed himself a start at Colonial this week coming, but fell out with 2-3 putt bogeys on the last two holes, and that's agony for someone who's had a pretty rugged year.
Yep.
And it's great to see. I think there were 13 Australians in the field, which was good in itself. Rob Allenby, Cam Percy, quite a handful of others made the cut. The one I was disappointed, Jeff Ogilvy went really well too, tied 32nd, I think.
Yeah, made the cut.
Yeah, but the one I was disappointed not to make the cut, and he missed by a shot, maybe two, was Oliver Goss. He's sort of fallen off the radar completely, and it would have been a real kick in the right direction for him, but just missed the cut because he doesn't get many starts anywhere at the moment.
So what's happening with him?
I don't know. I need to track him down, and I say that semi-regularly, but I'll make a
there's
point.
There's a lot of players you'd like to be speaking to on an almost weekly basis, which is, given the volume of them around the world at the moment, it's impossible to do.
Big part of the podcast, we're talking with Jeff, was, in fact, it wasn't part of the podcast. It was the part of the podcast you want to hear when the off button goes on, and the real not the real podcast, but the rest of it happens. And we spent a long time talking about the problem that we have in Australia is how do these guys take that next step? How do they get onto how do they do what Lucas Herbert's got doing last week and actually get somewhere? How do you get a card to play in Europe or America?
Well, wasn't it beautiful last week in the Belgian knockout? I can't remember the Belgian knockout. Wasn't it great? It must have, I don't know how much notice you took of it, but we've kind of lamented on this show the fact that young Australians are so obsessed with the States that they turn their back on Europe. And yet, because it wasn't the deepest field we've seen at a European tour event for a while, there were 8, 9, 10 Australians teeing it up in the knockout tournament. And it was lovely to see. And several of them got through to the knockout phase. They didn't progress far beyond that, but at least they got through to the second stage of the tournament through the sort of 36-hole stroke part of it. It was great to see a lot of Australian players playing in Europe, and you asked that question, Clates. Well, why aren't they being encouraged to play more in Europe?
They're being encouraged to play. I'm interested to hear Clates' point on this. They're being encouraged to play there, but they've grown up watching nothing but the US Tour on television now. It's a different generation from, me having grown up watching Greg Norman or Clates, but even you playing there, and it's totally different. They all just want to follow the paths of their heroes who are all on the US tour, and for a generation of people, that's Tiger Woods now. You know, we want to be the next Tiger. We don't want to be the next Seve. Yeah, or Roger, or
which is, do you want to make a living out of golf, or do you want to die on that Web.com tour? I mean, as Jeff said, there's no worse card than Web.com card. There's a graveyard out there.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's the only way onto that US tour. But wow, I mean, the problem with Europe is that I think last year Eddie Pepperell, who lost his card the year before, played well and got his card back. I think one other guy from the tour school made the top 110 or 15 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So Europe is not easy. It's not easy to get on that.
No, it's not easy golf.
There's a lot of good players in Europe nowadays.
And we should touch on the Australians there, Andy, before we get too far removed from this, because we've got a big show coming up and the boys are going to join us any tick of the clock. But our man, we're claiming him now, Dimitrios Papadatos. He was the best Australian performed in Belgium and got through to the second round of the match play phase, or the knockout phase, I suppose I should say, and is now in the top 10 Australian ranked players in the world, which...
Gee, that's big, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Happened quickly.
It's a good achievement. Yeah. And, we talked about it last year. He was up to 240, last week rather. He was up to 240, and I think he went up another 20 notches this week. So he's knocked out Brad Kennedy, from memory, out of the top 10 of Australian male players.
He's a guy that makes a fortune.
Just no one knows. You stand up in your porridge,
Last time I saw him, he was walking behind me at the 7th hole at Cottesloe, checking the course for the Cottesloe Pro-Am.
Yeah.
From where he flew to Portugal and won. So winning in Portugal, does that kind of guarantee him pretty much a top?
Put him into the 9th slot on the
How many
challenge.
guys get their card? 15?
15. Put him 9th on the challenge tour, and 15 get their card. And he told us last week that he was going to focus in, like even at the expense potentially of the US Open qualifier, to focus in on getting a card and getting out of that Web.com style rut, which is another one for the Challenge Tour.
Because he's a good player. He's
really good player, and he's got his head in the game. And he's going places, and great to see. Speaking of that too, I'm sorry to sort of rush through this, but
okay.
On the Asian Tour this week, probably a slightly lesser significant event, and obviously of importance in global golf. But Adam Blythe and Andy Martin, two guys who have been stalwarts on the Australasian Tour for a while, did really well over there. Blythe may or may not, coulda, woulda, shoulda won in China. So congratulations to him and Andy Martin, both on top 10s and really well played, and continuing the theme of guys doing well off Broadway. Yeah,
indeed. And just last one while we're doing our sort of global wrap up, Kingsmill, LPGA, the two frontliners. Well, no, there's a few frontliners now, but Minjee Lee is like the new captain of the team, and Suo seems to have, the last couple of weeks, it just seems to have been. She's been better. She's turning the wheel.
She threw those bad clubs out and put a decent set of clubs in, and she's played well for 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah, so that's good. And the other one,
she's on a good path, I think. Now.
Good.
Who was this other woman who went well for Australia?
Kay Webb.
Kay Webb,
popped up.
It's amazing that she does that. So she's top 20, I think, tied with Minjee at 19th, maybe. Really outstanding achievement when you consider she's been mincing around North Queensland for so long this year. And mincing's probably the wrong word. But she's done. She's a part-time tour player.
Yeah.
No,
but
she can still really play.
Oh, absolutely,
That's
and
awesome.
stamped her class. When she comes out and shows the rest of these women are now building up for the US Women's Open, so they're in full-on mode now, and she's shown that. Well, maybe not that she's ready to win another US Women's Open, but that she can contend.
Oh, don't take her lightly. Before we get to the break, because I think you'll be leaving us after we've spoken to the boys, I've got to get your thoughts on this story that I don't know how much momentum it's gathering about this new World Golf Tour that's been mooted. World Golf Group seem to be behind it. They're keeping pretty tight-lipped about it. 15 to 20 yearly tournaments around the world, each offering a purse of $20 million.
Yeah, let's just trash both tours.
So we'll never see the light of day.
Hopefully not. You would hope the players would have enough backbone to support the thing that's supported professional golf for the last 80 years and not run off for some cheap cash for some fly-by-nighters who, just go away.
End of story. Anything you want to say about it?
Yeah, no, further to that, so many players, and this speaks to what Clates is saying, so many of the players make their money on endorsements based on world rankings. We need to be in the top 10 and we'll get X million dollars. Yep. There's going to be no world rankings points available, and that's the big muscle that the PGA Tour has because they control that effectively.
And,
so this is a toothless tiger.
Nicklaus and Watson and Weiskopf and could have all run off and done that 40 years ago and chose not to because they knew what the best thing for the game was to support the tours. Because, anyone with a there are lots of billionaires out there who can throw $20 million around a week for to buy the best players in the world, but you would hope they had more backbone than that.
Is this similar to the thing that Norman was proposing 25, 30 years ago? It was right, Same thing, yeah.
And if you want a world tour, look at tennis. Look how much the 100... Eddie Prepple had it right. He said golf supports, with a great living, 300 or 400 players. Look how much the 300th ranked tennis player is making.
Yeah,
he's going to the local betting shop to bet, to bet against himself to make some money to pay his hotel bill.
Hello to whoever that Spaniard is out there.
Playing in
the
that
German out there. Good luck to you, mate.
You talk to Paul McNamee about tennis. The last thing golf would want to do would be to follow tennis down the world tour path.
True.
Golf does a brilliant job in supporting 300 or 400 guys who can really play golf. If you're the best 300 or 400th lawyer in the world, or stock trader, or doctor, or architect, you're doing pretty well. So if you're the best 200th golfer in the world, you're a pretty good player now.
And none of this will ever take off without the full support of what's now the International Federation of Tours. It's as simple as that. If you don't hear their imprimatur on something like this, you can stick a fork in it.
You're listening to Inside the Race. We've got a break out of the way. The main show is here. The boys have arrived. Steve Kuipert and Brendan James from Golf Digest, Australian Golf Digest and Golf Australia, respectively. They're going to talk about their golf course rankings, their top hundreds on the other side of this.
Hi, I'm Minjee Lee, and I'm proud to be an ambassador for MyGolf, Australian Golf's national junior program. One of my favourite things about coming back to Australia is seeing all the kids getting into golf. MyGolf is every Aussie kid's first step on their golfing pathway. It's all about fun and friendship, learning golf and life skills in a safe and healthy environment. So, if your child is between 5 and 12 years old, be sure to find a program near you at mygolf.org.au.
G'day guys, it's Brian Ruffles here, and I'm a long way from home playing on the Latin America Tour and living in the US, but I keep up with all my Australian golf by listening to Inside the Road.
Welcome back to the show. One of the most controversial elements of any year in the Australian Australian golf is when we get the top hundreds released in both Australian Golf Digest and Golf Australia, and Hazy has pulled this together. I don't know how he's done it. It has been an unbelievable performance to get us all in one room. But we've got Steve Kuipert, the Associate Editor of Australian Golf Digest, and Brendan James, the Editor of Golf Australia, in the studio with us. James, we'll go with you first. When was your welcome to the show again?
Thanks,
when did your 100 come out?
Ours came out in the January issue this year, so just before Christmas.
Steve, welcome. When did yours come out?
Yeah, always the March issue, so mid-February.
And when do people stop talking about them?
Probably about a month before the next one comes out 2 years later.
When do people stop complaining about them, James?
Never.
Never, right. So
you can never get it right. It's just not an exact science. It's just...
Share your... Before we start talking about the specifics of why that one there and why this one here, between the two of you, just give us a brief nutshell as to the criteria for assessing these golf courses.
Yeah, well, it's always the interesting part of it, I guess, is what criteria should you be looking at. Golf Digest, and this is globally, all the various affiliates around the world now go for a 7-point criteria, which is up from 4. So that covers shot values, design variety, memorability, resistance to scoring, conditioning, aesthetics, and ambience.
Wow.
And your interpretation of those, I guess, is some of the grey area, but in a way I actually kind of like that, the way different people actually want to interpret that. We do have some guidelines around it, of course, but I think that does lend itself to some different opinions.
Just rolled them off like the 7 commandments.
It is a little like that, yeah.
And you get grief on every single one of those, or is it just something specific?
This year's ranking was the first time using all 7. It was only, you take out resistance to scoring, aesthetics and ambience, and the other 4 were the only ones previously, which probably was simpler, I'll say that. I think having 4 is probably a better way to do it, but it certainly helps US Golf Digest with their global ranking lists if all their affiliates around the world are on the same page.
BJ, yours is totally different.
we've gone for a pretty simple model, which we've had in play since we started doing the rankings. Design, conditioning, visual appeal. And I think the feedback has always been good in terms of once people know the criteria of how a course was ranked, they're pretty happy with it because it's pretty simple to understand. So it's, predominantly based on design. So it's 60% design. So when we brief our judging panel at the start of the judging period, which it covers a 2-year span, and it's a 2-year rolling period, we just brief them on the various guidelines that go with each criteria. So when they're going and ranking a golf course, they have to take way more towards the design elements, and then conditioning, taking into account the time of year that they go, given that over a 2-year period they may only have time in winter to go and see a course in Melbourne. So you have to take into account the fact that it's winter in Melbourne. Likewise, if you go and see Paradise Palms in January, and there's been a cyclone there the week before, you've got to take into account that that's part of what's there at the time.
Mike Clayton's here as part of the show again. Do you just sit? Are you like just your classic old curmudgeon at times like this? We know how you feel about the handicapping system.
Yeah.
Do you feel when these hundreds come out, for people like us, not people like you, we can obsess about this sort of stuff for 6 months and have blues with mates of ours for hours about why one course is ranked 37 on one rating system and 23 on another. In fact, I am having blues with mates of mine about one of those, which I'll mention to you two boys in a minute. But how interested in this system and these additions are you? And the fact that these courses do get ranked the way they do.
Well, I was on Brendan's panel for a long time until they did the right thing and kicked all the architects off, which was a good thing because it got us out of the firing line of people who said, well, your courses just get ranked highly because you're on the panel and you rank them. But I've always liked Rand Morisset's a guy who runs a website called Golf Club Atlas, and he ranks golf courses by playing match play, hole versus hole. So, for example, he would go to the first hole at Kingston Heath and measure that against the first hole at Royal Melbourne, and the first hole at Kingston Heath would win. They would go to the second hole, and Royal Melbourne would win. So the match would be all square. They'd go to the third hole, Royal Melbourne would be 1 up, fourth hole, Royal Melbourne 2 up, and it would play a match between. So I've always thought it was a ranking of the architecture. So Brendan gives 60% to design. I would give 100% to design. Well, no, I'd give 90% to design. And so I never paid any, when I was on the panel, I paid no attention to the criteria and just ranked the golf course in terms of what was the best course and ranked everything down from that.
So why not condition? Why does condition not become as big a factor for you as it does for so many people who just play, who don't see golf through your eyes? The first thing you hear them say, because they don't quite understand the intricacies and sometimes real subtleties of a great, beautifully designed golf hole and a beautifully routed golf course. They don't get that. But what they do understand is, oh, mate, are those greens in Supernick? Oh, I didn't get a bad lie all day. Oh, the bunkers are awesome. Oh, it looks magnificent. That is a very common assessment and feedback you get from a lot of people who just like playing the game.
Yeah. I mean, the condition should be relative to how the course plays. So if the condition detracts from the way the course plays, then you should lose marks for that. So if the greens are soft mush, then the course is clearly not going to play as well as if they're firm and bouncy. But how do you rate the fairways at Barnbougle, which I think are perfect fairways for golf, because the contact between club, ball and ground is unmatched, except at Cape Wickham because it's fescue, versus the perfect mat-like fairways at Kingston Heath or Metropolitan. Most people would think Metropolitan and Kingston Heath were in better condition than Barnbougle, yet I think Barnbougle is unquestionably a better condition course than either of those because it plays better. It's one grass, so no matter where your ball lands, it's landing on the same surface. Just the greens are slightly quicker. And you're hitting off fescue, which is the purest turf you can play off. Yet you never hear anyone criticise the condition of of Metropolitan or Kingston Heath. Yet I always hear criticism of Barnbougle. And yet every time I go there, it's in perfect condition for golf. It mightn't be perfectly conditioned, but it's perfect for golf.
Right.
And so I think people misunderstand that they'll judge, for want of a better example, they'll judge Metropolitan, say, as the best conditioned course in the country, and because the fairways are perfect. But a perfect fairways, is that a good thing for golf? I think I think Barnbougle's fairways, which people would not judge as being perfect, but are perfect for golf, is a way better. It's a better way forward for the game because that's the way the game always was. Yeah.
You mean more practical rather than aesthetic?
As Mackenzie said in the Spirit of Andrew, he said, how do you ever appreciate a good life? You never get a bad one. And I can honestly say at Metro, since they redid those fairways, every lie I've had in 28 years has been identical. I've never had one lie any different from any other lie.
You should hit it where I hit it, Clates. They're way different.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, and that's a very subjective judgment, as is what people rate, I think, when they rate a golf course is a lot of people rate the experience they have playing the golf course. They're not actually rating the architecture, they rate the experience they have.
There is some danger in that, definitely. And I think just to go back to conditioning, I think one area where the industry's probably done a good job in the last 10 years or so is get away from this green is good mentality. Green does not necessarily equal better conditioning, particularly in a country like ours, and we've got a whole bunch of courses where water scarcity is such a big issue. Some courses should be brown, should be yellow, should be brown. They should be firm and fast. And we think back to Hoylake the year that Tiger won the Open there, where it was like this and brown and horrible to a lot of people's eyes. But no, that's actually how a lot of these courses should be playing. And so obviously every course is a little bit different, but I think on the whole, getting away from this soft green and lush equals good conditioning has been one win, I guess, we've had in this whole thing.
I tend to agree with you, but we still have the pressure that comes on a course superintendent from board level and from the memberships who I've seen members corner a course super and demand to know why they're letting the course. Why aren't they putting water on the golf course? Why isn't the course green? And those same course supers have been pressured into putting dye out in the golf course to make the course look green.
That's embarrassing.
It is,
and
right. There are supers out there who feeling the pressure of a board. If a board told them to spray paint the golf course purple, they'd do it because they were told to. At some point, I think they're the experts. They should be the ones in a position who feel comfortable enough to turn around and say, no, we're doing this because of that reason. And boards, while well-intentioned, don't know what a superintendent knows.
Well, if you go to an accountant to get your tax done, you'll never get in trouble. You do it yourself.
I saw a guy the other day.
That sounds like someone who's been audited, Clates.
I saw a bloke the other day who'd gone through all the bunkers at Lake Currituck and superimposed on the natural sand that is in the ground at Currituck, the jet white sand of Augusta, and said, look how much better our course would be ranked if we had white sand in the bunkers.
Wow.
It's like, where do you go with that? And that's the problem with. And the other problem I have with, I have a huge problem with resistance to scoring. One, I don't know what it means, and two, how does Swinley Forest which is one of the best courses in the world, get rated in the top 1,000? If it's because there's no resistance to scoring at Swinley Forest. It's the easiest course in the world, but
it's an area that I think a little education's going to be needed. For starters, resistance to scoring doesn't mean hard.
But the problem is that it perpetrates the myth that
that's right.
Hard is good, easy is bad.
That's right. And so that's an area where, a lot of care needs to be taken in terms of, making sure people are seeing the right things and interpreting that the right way. But it's certainly not meant to be more difficult equals better.
But that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, it does sound like that. Yeah. But, we go to great lengths to explain the definition of each of the criteria. But you're spot on. There is the danger that's the interpretation a lot of people have.
Which is a very American. You swallow the American. We're going to have the American. Golf Digest years ago did a list of one of their first that was America's hardest courses. Well, the Firestone goes to the top of that list. Wow.
And as we know, a difficult golf course doesn't necessarily make a good golf course.
Right, Andy, it's too polite in here. I need to get these two punching on a little bit. So, which system's better? Why, BJ? Why is yours better, BJ?
I think ours is better because it's simpler, and as I pointed out, with the criteria being as simple as it is, it allows our judges, our panel of, in 25, 26, probably be 30 next time we do it. It gives them a little bit of free rein to express how they feel about a golf course without actually having to go through a long list of guidelines. If it's simple, the architecture is the predominant thing that they have to look at, and all the people that are on the panel have been handpicked because they know a bit about golf courses, and if the criteria is simple for them, it means that they can put together their list far easier over the 2-year period.
Steve, why is yours better?
The easier answer is longevity. We've been at it a lot longer, but I think that probably sugarcoats it a little bit. I agree that simpler is often better, but I think if we've got the right panellists interpreting our criteria the right way, we'll probably get a more accurate result. And I think the other thing we're doing is growing the panel too. The next ranking is actually, we're going to have more than 100 judges. Because the hard thing about this country is it's so big. You've got golf courses. You need to get to Alice Springs, Kalgoorlie, Rockhampton, Cairns, and all the capital cities.
How do you monitor, as the guy who's looking at the list?
Yep.
How do you monitor such a large panel?
Yeah, well, that's taking a lot more time. But I guess that's the seriousness with which we take the whole project and process, is it's going to take up a lot more of my time than perhaps it has for anybody doing this in the past. But I guess it's because we know the value of this and also the responsibility we have to the golf clubs.
But do you have to then go and see more golf courses yourself so that when you get a list from Joe Bloggs that has, for example, I'll pluck a golf course out of the sky, Terry Hills in Sydney at number 2 in the country. That's obviously not the case.
Yeah.
So do you have to then go and see more golf courses yourself so that you can actually...
That is the plan, but I think it's more a case of if somebody does have Terry Hills ranked 2 in the country, you then go back and ask yourself why. You do a bit of a forensic audit in a way and say, okay, well, what are other judges giving this course? Why is this guy ranking it 2 and what's he ranking other courses? And then really just kind of dig down and say, okay, how's this result come about? You might end up chucking it out.
Sling
that score.
It's a
So
sling.
you just throw it out.
You
don't
just throw it out.
Yeah.
Any outlying scores that are way off the grid in either direction, you do have a look why.
No, you throw his
but
list
then
out.
you just
Do you
turf it.
currently sling?
Yeah, if there's a course that just gets a score that just flat out doesn't make sense, yeah, you've got to chuck it out because it. I mean, with a larger panel, I think the impact is less. Of course, one bad score or overly good or generous score, yeah, it maybe doesn't have the same effect, but it's definitely still worth going through the exercise of what happens if you do omit that score and what does it do for that course and the whole list overall.
So while we're talking about the various merits of both, Jonesy, which one did Golf Digest get most wrong? For the 100 that you put out, I imagine when theirs comes out, you sweat over their 100. And Steve, likewise, I'll ask you the same question. When you looked at Golf Digest's rankings, which one did you think, Jesus, you've got to be joking. Jeez, they've got that one wrong. And I'll ask you exactly the same question.
I got as far as Cathedral Lodge in their list, and then I closed the mag and haven't seen the rest of the list.
Whack! All right, you need to explain that.
When it became apparent that Cathedral Lodge was going to be open and ready for play 6 months before we were going to be publishing our ranking, we approached Cathedral Lodge to see if we could come down and get our judging panel, which there were at least a dozen of the guys based in Victoria who were champing at the bit to go and have a look at it. And they came back to us and said, we are not ready to be ranked. We don't want to be ranked. And so we abided by their wishes. And then 5 weeks after we publish ours, and Digest comes out with Cathedral Lodge on their list, I was gobsmacked. But that's part of the game we play as competitors.
It's interesting to hear that because we were actually specifically invited to come. It's the word I got was Cathedral chose us over Golf Australia to rank it.
Well, we were invited to come to the opening.
Okay,
and we could have played funny buggers and put it in the list based on our guys on the ground that were there. But we chose to follow their wishes.
The timing, I think, I was going to actually say this with Clates earlier, but didn't get a chance. It's a moment in time thing. You know, when the rankings get put out, it's a snapshot of a moment in time. I think for both magazines, if we were now to publish the list today, a few months later, it'd probably look quite different. But I guess just the timing of the two rankings, we actually had a couple more months up our sleeve because 2 months later coming out, we had a whole bunch of judges go to Cathedral. I think it was the first or second weekend in December. We had 40 on the panel for this list and 16 of them gave scores for Cathedral, which is, for a golf course that had just been opened and is obviously highly exclusive and private, was a really good strike rate. So we had no qualms whatsoever about putting it in because, you know, we had enough judges see it. Granted, I think there's a golf course that will be better for another, like they all are, another year's worth of conditioning, another growing season, just overall maturity. But, yeah, we had no problems with the fact that it was still in more than acceptable shape and that enough people saw it.
So what about vice versa? The same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at the Golf Australia list for a few months now. I couldn't single out one. Historically, Bonneville, not just this ranking, but previous ones. Bonneville's always been one course that's had quite a bit of disparity about it on the two rankings. I forget what the gap in numbers was this time around. It's usually about sort of 20 or 30 places. But
where was it on your list?
I think mid-30s, high 30s.
Bonneville's always staggered me.
Bonneville is, yeah.
Why, Clates?
Maybe I had a bad experience there, but I just think there are way more than 30 golf courses in Australia, miles better than Bonneville. I think that's almost a bellwether course for someone who's rating the experience over the architecture.
It's one of those courses, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just one of those courses that people love or hate, and I think the majority of people love it. For what reason? I think that's what I'd love to explore. Exactly right.
I don't see what they... And the other two courses, which Cathedral were probably smart in not inviting Golf Australia's panel, because it's a much different panel. And the other two courses that always distinguish the Lakes and the Australian. Your magazine's always going to put the Australian above the Lakes. Golf Australia's always going to put the Lakes above the Australian because of the makeup of the panel. So if the Golf Australia guys had gone to Cathedral Lodge, I don't think there's any way it would have been rated as highly as.
It'll be interesting.
So in a way, they were smart inviting you guys because they understand how the panel works. Because
our panel is full of golf nerds.
Yeah,
and with all due respect to those guys who are listening now,
yeah,
they're full of golf nerds.
Yeah,
they're all over design.
Yeah.
So the feedback we get, we go back to Bonneville. The feedback we get about Bonneville is the fact that, yeah, it's a great experience, but the fact that the holes are so separated by these lengthy walks between greens and the next tee kind of breaks up the experience, and they don't like that.
I mean, no one can ever justify to me that Bonneville is a better course than the Grange West. I mean, it's just having a laugh.
Yeah. Well,
but when we
it's ranked higher than. I mean, just really.
We also do Australia's 50 favourite courses, which is purely send it out to the readers. Where do you enjoy playing the most? And Bonneville has won that 2 years running because of the experience.
I get it.
People love to. People love to go and play. It's a great location on New South Wales North Coast. They like the fact that they can sit out there on the veranda and look at the golf course. And as we touched on before, the Australian golfer is seduced by green. They love to look out on a green golf course.
Yeah, we're almost worse than the Americans. I mean, I tell you how many people, when they comment about a golf course, comment about the condition of it. When they go to Peninsula and they're talking about how good the greens are, I don't care how good the greens are. I do, but What
They
about
go
the
to
holes,
Bombal
mate?
and they find a green golf course with white bunkers,
Yeah.
tall pines, and flooded gums.
It seduces the senses, doesn't it?
And it does. And it's
not mine.
they for those that haven't ventured further than their own golf course or but actually been to Augusta, they actually think that looks like Augusta, and that seduces them, and that's why it's miles ahead when it comes to Australia's favourite golf course.
To go back to the question, though, the comparison between the two lists, I guess I've got a unique position because I've worked for both magazines. And so you hear criticism of your opposition magazine when you're at one, and then, of course, hearing the flip side of it. I guess across my time with both titles, I would summarise it as Golf Australia's panel being a collection of like-minded thinkers and our panel probably being a bit more of an eclectic background. I mean, that's a very brief summary of it, but if I were to do it in one sentence, that's probably how I'd describe it. But that's the benefit of having heard two sets of critiques over the years.
Critique stroke abuse.
Yes, yeah.
In saying that, we've got women on our panel.
So do we.
You had women on your panel this year?
Yeah, more next time, but yes.
So let's cut to another issue here, and I guess in some ways Cathedral is part of this question as well. BJ, you talked about your favourite course list. How the hell can anyone rank or care about the rankings of Alliston, of Capital, of Cathedral when they will never see it? They'll never set foot through the door. Who gives a crap from the average golfer? Who cares? Why are they in the list at all?
Well, Capital's never been ranked by us because, like we did with Cathedral, we adhere to their wishes not to be ranked.
So and they also know where they'd be ranked if they did submit themselves to the scrutiny of the rankers.
I suspect that's the case.
We've long thought the same thing too.
With Elliston, we actually didn't include it for quite a few years for that very reason. That who's going to play there? I mean, I know more people that have played Augusta than have played Elliston.
That's amazing.
Okay, so, but I bowed to the argument that it's a golf course on the ground in Australia, and we're ranking Australia's top 100. So, if Royal Melbourne, for example, shut the gates tomorrow and didn't let anyone in there, it would still be ranked if they allowed us to go in there and rank it.
Yeah. This is one area where we've got consensus. I've been reading some of the tweets we've had in the lead up to this podcast. You know, there's some questions around accessibility. And I think Brendan would agree with me that this isn't a ranking about accessibility. It's two simple rules. Does it have 18 holes? Is it in Australia?
Why does it have 18 holes?
Well, I guess,
rank a 9-hole course?
yeah, I think there's probably space for another ranking of 9-hole courses.
Well, I think
well, we actually had 4 9-hole courses receive votes for our top 100. One of them, Bunnings in Western Australia, finished maybe in about 140th spot. So they're coming. The 9-hole courses, they're getting better and better all the time. I don't think it'll be too long before we see a 9-hole course break into the top 100.
If the Dunes Club in Michigan or Royal Wellington and Newmarket in England were in Australia, they would both easily be in the top 50 course in Australia.
I know, but 9-hole courses, people have looked down on 9-hole courses in this country forever.
Because there aren't any good ones. Well, there is. Little Frankston should be on there.
The Millionaires Club.
Clubs are fantastic. I mean,
absolutely.
That's absolutely a top 100 course in Australia easily. And just because it's a 9-hole course,
I just don't think enough judges get to see it.
Yeah, if you're rating the architecture, it definitely should be on there.
Absolutely.
So, both of the hundreds, Tasmania, well, when I say Tasmania, let's throw King Island into the mix as well, is that they're the bullets, right? Royal Melbourne West sits number one on both. It feels like the gap's closing a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong. Clates, you come into this one as well. Which is the next club? Which is the next course that'll be number one outside of Royal Melbourne West? Who is the next club, if you had to look at, project and see where they're tracking and the trajectory these courses are on, particularly the ones that haven't been around for that long that are, forcing their way into your top tens, and you tell me which one you think it might be, Clates, based on your observations. Who takes over, number one, next?
I think Royal Melbourne West has got more world-class holes than any course in this country. So it's going to be hard to knock it off. I mean, I think it's lost its position once, which was on the digest list a few years ago, and Kingston Heath was number one. Royal Melbourne constantly gets full marks from, I would say, 2/3 of our panel. Kingston Heath, Cape Wickham, Barnbougle Dunes, Lost Farm, all come in this tight little bunch, and they are going to exchange spots over the years. New South Wales is probably the one to watch, given that they've now changed their super. They've got a program in place where they're going to be addressing certain design issues. That'll be the one that I can see moving in the top 10. But it may only be one spot because of the strength of the rest of the top 10. Royal Adelaide, we saw on our list, move up based on Tom Doak's work there. But it's difficult to see it moving deep into the top 10, given the strength of the top 10. The most volatile area of the ranking is kind of the bottom half, where you get courses, say, from 55 through to 90, where the voting, there's probably only a 20-point spread. And you're getting down, some courses are 3 ranking points ahead of another based on the fact that there's 0.3 of a point in the judge's final analysis that separates them.
So just to put that in comparison, BJ, when you say there's only 0.3 of a point or 20 points or whatever, how far is Royal Melbourne clear of number 2?
It's only like maybe 2.5 points. So there's not much there, but because the foundation of the ranking or the voting for Royal Melbourne West is so solid, it's the ones behind them that are going to exchange spots. 4 will become 2, 2 will become 3, 3 will become 4, and that'll change every couple of years.
I think that's probably true of our list as well. Yeah. It was very close this year, Cape Wickham and Kingston Heath. In fact, at one time, as scores were coming in, both of those two courses were occupying top spot. It was only once they were all tallied up that it basically fell the same way it had previous years. But there's a real love for Kingston Heath out there. There's no question that a lot of people see it as good and in some cases better than Royal Melbourne, which again comes down to personal opinion. But to answer Andy's question, I think it's either of those two. Kingston Heath gets just a different set of scores, possibly, or Cape Wickham, more people getting to Cape Wickham. It really could. I was last at Cape Wickham in June last year, which you'd think could be horrendous. The surfaces, what Clates was saying about fescue is that's the surface for golf courses. That's an amazing property, terrific design, and it's got the right grass for that place. I just think it's a case of enough people getting there, and hopefully just everything that goes with being a golf course on King Island, that just viability wise that those two courses survive. It could be the one. It could be the one out of those 3.
The course to knock off Royal Melbourne hasn't been built yet.
I was waiting for that.
And just getting back to what I was saying, so we had Royal Melbourne West at number 1, 99.8 was its average. So basically what happens is that our judges submit their lists, so their top course gets 100 points. Second, 99 and down. So the average score attributed to Royal Melbourne West by our judges was 99.8. The next best was Barnbougle Dunes on 97.5.
Gotcha.
I mean, my point is, we've been the architects at Kingston Heath for nearly 20 years now. I love that course. But Does anyone want to make an argument, Kingston Heath's the best course in the world? No, I didn't think so. But you can make the argument that Royal Melbourne is. Absolutely. Definitely the composite course. In fact, Royal Melbourne should almost have three. They should almost rank. The composite course should almost be ranked. Composite course, because a lot more people play the composite course than play Elliston, and it's a golf course. They should rank the composite course, the West course, and the East course. But absolutely is an argument. The composite course is the best course in the world. You can make that argument.
Well, that used to be the only course that Dodgers used to.
That's right. We did for a long time. Yeah. In fact, Bill Richardson said to Rowan Clark one time, "Well, yeah, we should have three courses."
Well, they should. They should rank three courses.
Yeah, composite courses on the whole, like the Vines was the same in WA. How to treat composite courses. I mean, the National has a composite course. I don't know how often the members actually play.
The Vines has got three 9-hole courses that they cobble together to make a tournament
exactly,
course.
and you can make a composite course different every occasion. Every day of the week if you want. So it's one of those grey areas that I think you just have to pick and stick a little bit. You need to have, even though we changed by going away from composite courses, I think it's something you just have to say, right, we're nailing our colours to the mast here. This is what our policy is on it, and sticking with it.
I mean, you look at somewhere like Indooroopilly, or even Rosebud. There's so many different combinations of golf courses. You could end up filling a list of Australia's best composite courses.
All right, so as sports fans, we have our particular bents. If you walk into an MCG or a Fenway Park or a Wembley or Andy's favourite, the Maracana, Anfield, Wimbledon, anything like that, you're daunted. Every time I walk into the MCG as a 46-year-old bloke, I'm like, holy cow, this is unbelievable. And you think back to everything that's happened there. How confident are you both that your rankers aren't fanboys, fangirls, and when they walk in and go, oh my God, I'm at Royal Melbourne?
I can confidently say that they appreciate the position they're in to rank golf courses, and most of our panel have been doing it for a while now. There may have been some of that early on in the piece, because they were able to gain access to more courses, given that they were on our panel. So, they would ask for us to clear the way for them to get access to a golf course. Certainly the first time that I took a group up to Elliston, that was the case. And it was like, wow, here we are at Elliston. But when you see as many golf courses as our guys do, and like even myself, I've been doing this 22 years, you get over that initial wow, and you look for the finer detail.
I guess the question is along the lines of, not saying this is the course that's going to happen, but could Tea Tree Bay ever theoretically outpoint Barnbougle? Tea Tree Gully, sorry, in Adelaide.
In theory, yes. In theory, if you got enough scores saying that, but then you'd probably ask yourself, why is a course that's never been ranked in the top 100 or not for donkey's years?
That's why you've got to have someone like either Steve or myself who gets to see a lot of the golf courses. Needs not vet, but they need to cast their eye over it to police.
Maybe I should try a different course. Maybe I should try
Carron-up.
Yeah, a Carron-up. That's a good one. Thanks, Clay. Like something that's awesome, known, famous, good, everything about it. Could it potentially knock off Royal Melbourne if a new set of eyes walk through the door?
I guess from our point of view, with our panel, it's probably two things. It's education and the numbers. Like we have a handbook that we give out to all our judges that's 10,000 words long. It's a lot to take in, and it's meant to be a reference tool rather than something to be rote learned. But just to get everybody thinking about, okay, what are we looking for here? Exactly that. You can show up at a great golf course and easily be seduced by the look of it, but are you actually looking at what's in the ground? Are you looking at the right things at the end of the day when you're putting your scores in? But to go back to what you're saying about another golf course, whether it's Carron-up or Tea Tree Gully or wherever, the numbers won't lie. If you've got the right people on the panel and they're looking at the criteria the right way, and you get a set of scores that suddenly throws a spanner in the works like that, you go back in and ask yourself why. If it's one or two judges, you probably go, okay, can probably chuck it out. If it's a whole bunch of them, then you go, okay, well, what's happened at this golf course? Have they done extensive work? Is it better? Has it changed? Have they really done something significant? And go and look at it that way.
And did then you go and look at it?
Probably, yeah. If you were to get a late carrying up suddenly scoring when all the numbers were in at number one, and it's, of course, for instance, I hadn't seen, or one of the other guys in the office hadn't seen in a while, you'd get over there and at very least make some phone calls, but I'd be inclined to get over there and have a look and say, right, what are they seeing that hasn't been seen in the past?
So do you both have a minimum number of scores that need to be submitted for every single course before a final rankings numbers?
We work on 55%. So depending on the total number of judges, we work on a minimum 55% of those judges need to have seen golf course in a 2-year rolling period.
Okay, great. Now, listen, we're doing this. The sun's just coming up. We've met ridiculously early to record this week because you guys are going to get to a breakfast and go and play some golf at Metro. There's a lot of people have sent through questions. So why don't we just, to the three of you guys, Hazy and I'll tic-tac and we'll work our way through as many of these as we possibly can. Ross Flanagan's already asked about how the criteria required to be one of your golf course raters. So that's already been done. Greg O'Brien wants to know, and you sort of touched on this a bit earlier, you three, but if you can't walk the course, don't rate it. That is making a statement. What are your thoughts?
I've heard this. We all have heard this. But to me, it's injecting too much grey where you want some black and white. I think what we were saying before about it being a golf course and being in Australia should be enough. When does the ability for one golfer to walk a golf course suddenly become somebody else's inability? It's like the accessibility. When does a golf course stop being accessible? It's just too grey where you actually want some black and white in these rankings. And so who's to decide who can walk a golf course?
So, Andy, can you hear that noise?
Go on.
That's Clate's ticking.
One of the criteria for judging a course should be the quality of the routing. How well did the architect use the land to route a coherent golf course? And if it's a difficult course to walk or it's essentially unwalkable, and I would say a 900-metre walk between a green and a tee is unwalkable, then you lose a lot of points for that. You rate it, but it has to be rated down. If it's a terrible walk, it means it's a bad routing or a bad bit of land or both. Yep. So you're clearly losing points for that. I don't care how good the holes are.
And that's been the feedback we've got, and we used Bonville as the example before that we got back from our judges pretty much to the man. Was the holes are too separated. Conditioning's been good. The holes separated by themselves are pretty good, but the big drawback for them is the fact that the holes are so separated by these long treks.
But most courses in Australia are very walkable. We haven't got a stretch of housing estate courses that you drive from one hole to another that are built to sell real estate.
We're reluctant to sort of bring in too many individual courses into this, but invariably questions are going to be asked by our listeners about this. So I'd rather not sink the boots too far into someone if you've got something that you really want to say, but let's have a crack and see where it ends up. From Kevin Nolan, I know most courses ranked 60 to 100 could almost be in any order, which is basically what you guys have said. But how is it possible that Golf Digest, Steve, didn't have Cranbourne in its top 100?
Oh, look, we could go in and pick any number of courses in and out. With respect to what Kevin's saying about an individual course, I mean, he's spot on about the back end of the ranking. The easiest thing to do is a top 50. I think most courses in Australia know whether they're in the top 50 in the country. There's probably 100 courses that think they're good enough for the second 50. And that's what we've both experienced. The numerics of 50 to 100 are so tight. And even from 50 to, say, 120, the 20 courses that miss out on the list are not that far away. But that's been my experience. I think there are probably close to 100 clubs that think they're good enough to be in that second 50.
But he's not a member at Cranbourne. The pennant final was at Cranbourne on Sunday. It's ridiculous that Cranbourne's not in the top 100 in Australia.
Beautiful.
It's laughable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's arguably a top 50 course. There are a bunch of courses in the top 100 that aren't even close to being as good as Cranbourne. Not even close to it.
Well, I think we had 100 164 courses receive votes from our judges. And I would think if you went to 64 of those courses that didn't make the 100, they'd all think they should be in the 100. We, for example, the West Australian Club in WA, we had feedback almost immediately that our ranking came out, why I wasn't in the top 100. Well, it simply just didn't get enough votes.
Well, that was the next question on our sheet about WA.
Yeah, and look, it's not a cop-out from our point of view. I mean, your WA golf club's our Cranbourne, clearly in this situation, and that's it. It's the simple answer is, it just the votes it got weren't quite enough.
I've seen both in the last week, the last 2 weeks, and you couldn't possibly think that West Australian Golf Club was a better course than Cranbourne. Anyone who didn't have their eyes painted on would judge that.
And to be honest,
Cranbourne was clearly a better piece of architecture.
This is the beauty of all this. It's really eye of the beholder.
Do you take it personally though?
Well, you
can't.
Yeah.
You
can't. But has it
but
taken
what
you some time?
I tell you what I would be doing is I'd be making sure I'm getting to Cranbourne in the next 2 years before the next ranking. I want to see this for myself.
When our ranking comes out, when January usually comes out, I'm thankful that Christmas comes straight after, and then I go on annual leave the second week of January, and I avoid Twitter for 6 weeks.
You'll love Cranbourne. When was the last time you were there?
Oh, years
a long
ago.
time ago.
A long time ago. Yeah.
But the best ranking is Tom Doak's confidential guide, where rather than,
with all due respect, of course,
rather than have to, absolutely, but rather than having to say Kingston's a better course than Bambugal, he would give them both a 9.
Yeah.
But if you took Tom Doak to the West Australian Golf Club and to Cranbourne, he would clearly give one course. One would be a 4 or a 5, and one would be perhaps a 3. And I'll back Tom Doak's judgment of a golf course against that. That is not a subjective. Guy knows more about judging a golf course than anyone in the world. And I'll guarantee you what he would, if he saw those two courses, 100% guarantee you that one would be ranked above the other.
It's funny we say that, and I am inclined to agree, but yet we're all sitting here agreeing that architects shouldn't be rating golf courses. And well, architects shouldn't be on the panels. Yes.
But architects are entitled to go and write their own book and rank a golf.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is what he did.
But this to me is the magic of the process is that we've got these opinions. We've got some that we'll hear. They'll come from a point of experience and expertise, and absolutely. I mean, I would say to anybody, having been in the industry for 18 years, that the various corners of the industry, your equipment, your PGA pros, architects and superintendents are my absolute favourite people to talk to. They're fantastic.
Do you, even for somebody like you though, Steve, do you feel like they speak a different language sometimes, that they're occupying? And maybe you're a bit different, but I can sit and listen to people like Darius Oliver and Mike Clayton have a conversation about a golf course or a hole versus a hole merit. Excuse me. And it's like listening to great music. I know the music is nice to my ear, but I don't understand why. Listening to these guys talk about golf, I love listening to. I understand about 5% of what they're talking about, but I love their passion, their language, the intricacy of their knowledge.
You're right. It's one of those situations where you shut your mouth, open your ears, and hope some of it permeates you because you just want to pick up something you didn't already know. But I just love the rich tapestry of voices in all this. You know, whether it is our readers and listeners having their opinions, and I love the debate that it brings every 2 years. And you know, part of me wishes we could actually do it more often, but part of me is very grateful we don't. But it's just what makes it such an interesting process is everybody's got an opinion.
Andy, what you were talking about there was the sole reason why I had architects on our panel.
Yeah,
because no one knows more about golf courses than architects. And I think part of our role as a golf magazine publisher is to educate as well as inform and entertain. And if we can convert just one guy who knows nothing about, doesn't even know what a Redan is, if we can convert one from thinking that green is good, brown is bad, then we've done our job. And when we had Mike on the panel, we had Bob Harrison, we had Richard Chamberlain.
Neil Craft was on.
Yeah. we had these architects on the panel. We were getting good feedback on the courses they were seeing, because they don't just go and see their own golf courses. They go and see a whole raft of courses. And so we were getting a lot of flack for that. So we had an experiment one year where I dropped the architects for one ranking issue, and because a lot of the criticism was directed at Mike being on our panel, who
he's working on about 75 courses.
He was first on our panel when really he was still on the tour. He was still playing. He'd been on the panel forever. But we were getting a lot of flack for the fact that Clates was on the panel and that his courses seemed to be getting right up there. Took him off the panel, and his courses improved in the ranking.
Yeah, right.
Because the ranking I submitted was not the one I truly believe. I mean, if I actually put a ranking in that was truly where I thought they were, I would have our courses higher than I ever put them.
Which was,
I always marked them down because I'm not going to put Royal Queensland at where I think it is, because they're going to laugh at me if I do that.
Yeah. Whereas
we had Queensland 5 or 10 spots below where I think it
right,
is.
Okay, yeah.
We had one architect on the panel who was dismissed from the panel, who submitted a ranking of 40 courses, and the top, I think 10 of the top 12 were all from his company. So that found the waste paper basket.
The perception still remains a little bit like we were saying before about how to interpret various criteria. The perception remains that Clate's influence is still there on the Golf Australia list, and there's no question stacking them up.
It can't be.
Your courses do sit a lot higher in Golf Australia versus
because they're better.
Well, that's because they're better. I would argue because they're better.
Well, look, I'm torn on this one because as a golfer, I really appreciate your work and what you've done. There's no question that a lot of golf courses in this country are better off for your work. But sit the two lists side by side, and it's really quite palpable. There's a whole bunch of them that just are that much higher. And so whether it's a lingering effect of architects being on the panel, whether it's coincidence, whether it's something else, it's there.
I mean, each panelist is doing their own thing. There's no collusion. I mean, apart from when we have panelist days where we go and actually play a golf course, and we sit around over a few beers and talk about what the course was like and our various opinions in the post-mortem. But Clates has no influence over our panel.
But that's the perception.
Well, the perception's wrong.
Yeah, often is.
Yeah. And I had an interesting argument, as I always do, with Duncan Andrews, who said, you shouldn't be on that panel. And I said, Duncan, I rate the courses as fair as I can. In fact, I rate them down deliberately so I don't get accused of that. But he was right. It's way better off. I'm way better off not being on it.
Yeah.
Because you rank your courses up there. That's why your courses are. But then you have to delve into that. Well, let's discuss the merits of Lake Karnap or the Lakes versus the Australian and Kooyonga or whatever. You have to then start arguing the merits of.
Well, see, something like the Australian, again, it seduces because it's green with white bunkers. It's an American golf course. We see similar courses on TV during the year, and the membership, that's what they want. Now, you look back at photos of the Australian from years gone by, and it was a far better golf course when it was a link-style golf course.
No, but in 1989, Golf Digest had it rated 2 in the country. The interesting thing about those old lists is Royal Melbourne, the Australian, Kingston Heath, Royal Sydney, Royal Adelaide, Royal Canberra, Lake Karnap, Metro, New South Wales, is how much better the quality of golf course is 30 years later than it was then. Yeah. I mean, how much better the ranking of how much better the actual golf Australians get to play is over that list. Royal Sydney at number 4 in the country. I mean, number 4 now, Lost Farm, Barnbougle, Cape Wickham. I mean, all the golf courses that have.
St Andrews Beach is a better golf course.
I think it's a great exercise to actually go back. We both do it, put the year that the golf courses opened on the list. And if you just took the ones that began with a 2 and a 0 and look at those, look what the landscape of golf in this country has become just this century so far. It's phenomenal, the addition of the golf courses we've had and how much better, as Clate said, the whole country is.
Well, there's a lot of questions here. We're probably not going to get time. We're going to have to let you go. We've been going nearly an hour with you three on this one. just the business of, you mentioned Duncan Andrews, Clates, the business of running a golf course and getting people through the gate. How coveted from committees and owners of golf clubs, how coveted is a high number?
The smarter clubs really use it as a promotional tool, the fact that they're ranked on either list. So much so that I actually, where possible, I say to our judges, if they can view courses without giving a course prior knowledge that they're coming, because you do tend to, like when we do have get-togethers with, getting a group of the panel together to go and view a golf course, you find it's been manicured within an inch of its life for that day. So you tend to get a false impression of what the general public will get. So they always want to know before it comes out what number they are. We say you won't know until it's out on the newsstand, because and one of the myths around this is that it's all advertising driven. If such and such a club, if 13th Beach takes an ad, we'll get a higher ranking. Well, that's a myth, because our advertising guys, they go and sell ads against our top 100, but they only know what's in the 100. They don't know any positions. There's only one person who knows before it's published, and then we move on from there.
We actually go a step further. Nobody knows the list, any makeup whatsoever. I guess the attitude that our sales guys go out there with, this is the one issue in a 2-year cycle. If you're a golf club you want to be seen in, whether you're in the list or out of the list, this is the one in 24 that you want to be part of. But that's definitely another perception that there's some money involved here, and there's absolutely not.
I don't understand that perception. I wouldn't accuse either of you of that. But one question that I've been asked previously, especially when I knew we were doing this, is you could make a case. Clates might be able to do it on the fly. I'm not sure that there are 10. Let's go with 10 better courses in the Sandbelt than there are in Sydney. And you'll never see a list without a high Sydney course.
I agree with that. I would think there are 2 Sydney courses in the top dozen are lakes in New South Wales.
Yeah,
easily.
I guess, is there any pressure on you guys to have X number from Queensland, X number from Western Australia?
No.
None at all.
It's not it's a national ranking. Yeah. It's not a collection of state rankings married together.
Understood that. I guess I'm saying, if you Spring Valley might sit nicely against a couple of Sydney clubs or wherever that might get a higher ranking, but because we've already got 10 in Melbourne, can't be in the list.
No, they fall how they fall.
If the top 10 was all Melbourne, it's all Melbourne.
Okay. I got a really good question here from Gene Moore, which we've got 1,000 questions, Andy, from listeners, and I apologise we're not going to get to them, but I think this is a good one. Is it a good idea to let age and historical value add more of an influence over ratings? That is, a top 10 course over 50 years can better hold its mark by earning more points based on its historical value and not be relegated by over-marketed, talked-up new courses that 20 years down the track fade away.
Well, we kind of just touched on that, and how over the last 30 years it's evolved. And we've had some great courses come online. So Barnbougle, Lost Farm, St Andrews Beach. They're all...
But you're not going to fall off. But 1989, anyone guess what number 13 was in 1989?
Palm Meadows?
Sanctuary Cove.
Sanctuary Cove.
So there's a classic case of a fad course at the time that generated a lot of publicity, and that's is it still in the top 100? I guess it probably.
Yeah, it is. It's sort of in the middle of our list. Like I know one we often refer to is, I think we had Hope Island ranked 6 in the country at some point in the early 90s.
Hope Island was a pretty good course.
It was, but I mean, again, you look at what's come in after it, and it's a good question because historically there have been a lot of new entrants that have started high and then just gradually settled back into perhaps a more appropriate ranking. Sometimes it goes the other way. A lot of it can come down to timing. When in the 2-year cycle does the course open? But I think a lot of the new courses do seem to come in with a bullet and then give them a couple of rankings, they kind of settle into a natural place. But
some of that could get back to what we were talking before we came on air, where the evolution of said golf course is not quite the way a course designer intended, where all of a sudden the design principles of that golf course are compromised by the way that the course super at the time sets the golf course up. Where you've got, and I won't name the golf course, but the course we were talking about before with Steve was where the fairway bunkers have now all of a sudden got a collar of rough around them. Now, that defeats the whole purpose of the fairway bunker being there. If a ball can't run into the fairway bunker, why have it there anyway? And that wasn't the case when the course opened. So, course might come in at 30 in the ranking based on, what you see when it's first opened. And you'd expect that it would go maybe higher with maturing, but some of these courses take a backward step simply because of the way they're set up as the course moves on through its life.
There can be no definitive answer to this question, and I understand that. Is Wanneroo or Tewantin in either of your lists? No.
Wanneroo just missed out.
Okay, so that's a good. We'll go with Wanneroo, a really nice little course. And given what you said before, both of you, about the importance of, for marketing purposes, if nothing else, being in the top 100, what would you generically say to clubs? How do I get in the top 100? What do I do?
I sometimes tell a story from about 10 years ago. I was at a club. I won't name it because it doesn't need to be named. The story is about that attitude. I was playing and they said, "What do we need to do to get in the top 100?" And I looked around. The golf course was filled on a Wednesday morning, and there were a lot of golfers out there just enjoying it. And I said, "Look, point blank, you wouldn't want to. You actually wouldn't want to go through the headache of churning this place up, doing something to make it that good that it gets into the top 100. It's serving its market where it was, and the people around it was serving its market very well. Not every golf club should be aspiring to be in the top 100. It's not necessarily the place for every single course. But for those that do, have a look at your architecture first and foremost. How old's the golf course? Have things changed? Do you need to get somebody with expertise in to have a look at, how the golf course is played now versus years ago? But I still come back to that same story. It's some courses I think want to be in the top 100 that really shouldn't even be. That shouldn't be their aspiration.
I always say, have a look at your tree management program, and I know Clates has his detractors and reckons he gets around with a chainsaw in the back of his car, but
he's shaking his head a lot this last hour, Clates.
But the too many golf courses allow the trees on their golf course to dictate too much of how the course is played. And I was at Huntingdale yesterday afternoon, and they've undertaken a program to get rid of a lot of the tea tree, and they've opened up various areas to expose the sand underneath. There's one hole there where they actually had a tree that had overgrown so much that it was in front of the fairway bunker. So the fairway bunker was null and void. And that was an integral part of the design of that hole. Now, if a lot of golf courses spent, and look, it gets back down to the amount of guys they've got on staff, the amount of money they've got in the budget, I understand all that. But if they spent more time addressing issues with trees and overgrown areas and weren't blocked by board members because they like those trees, then those courses would become more enjoyable, more fun. That's
why I'm an advocate of get the experts in. An architectural eye, somebody who maybe doesn't have the affinity for the place that members and board members, well-meaning as they might be, have. Get an expert in, get them to look at things like tree lines. And that is one thing that changes over time, as we know. But I don't think too many clubs would be worse off for at least just an appraisal from somebody who knows what they're looking at.
But my wattle,
sometimes it's just common sense.
Yeah, well.
My wattle is so pretty, though. It's so beautiful.
No one does trees worse than Australian golf courses. Ashley Mead, my partner in the business, and I, we went to the British Open in 2015, and we drove down after St Andrews down to London, and we stopped off at 6 or 8 courses, not Parkland courses, but not links courses. I said at the end of it, I said, what's the one thing we've seen on every course we've walked? What have we seen? He said, not once did we walk around a golf course and say, there's a tree that shouldn't be there. Not once. Because the English understand the role of trees in golf, because Harry Colt drummed into them, keep them as a part of the scenery, and we've jammed them all over the stage in Australia. And which is, and so our, we all get the criticism. I get the criticism was we're trying to get the trees off the stage. But committees don't I mean, if you're talking about courses wanting to get into the top 100, a whole lot of them could do themselves, manage your trees better. It would be a good start.
I had chainsaw.
I've got sometimes Mother Nature takes care of that kind of business. I was at Terry Hills a couple of weeks ago, and Terry Hills was kind of just floating between here and there in the ranking, and all of a sudden it took a jump in the ranking, and it turned out that we'd had a massive storm come through Sydney, and it killed about 30 or 40 trees in key areas of the golf course. And all of a sudden, the greens were firmer on those particular areas of the golf course. The grass condition was better. The ground was holding more water for the grass because these trees weren't sucking up all the moisture. And the course was just that much better to play.
Yeah.
And then you went into the greenkeeper's shed, and there were 2 chainsaws on the ground. One had lightning wind on it, one had thunderstorm on it.
Yes, I believe Mother Nature took only a fraction of the trees.
That's I haven't heard that one before. That's very good. But I mean, we often, so many golfers obviously know Augusta National from what they see on TV, and we all love it, and it's got its merits as a go-to course. But talking about trees, you go to Augusta, and of course we all know it's covered in these huge pine trees, but look closely and there are none that are that close to the greens.
No.
They're all set back, and that's really, there's something about that, isn't there?
And interestingly, having been there the past couple of years, they had an ice storm go through there a few years ago and took out the Eisenhower tree, but it also took out almost an entire layer of canopy across the golf course, and to the point where you could stand in front of the clubhouse and see almost down to Amen Corner, which you haven't been able to do for decades. And in the years since, you talk to the players and they say the course has never been in better shape.
Yeah, there's something to that.
We're going to talk about the Ranfurly goat track. That
Are you having
you guys trying to dodge that question?
Gianluca
It
Romano
might embarrass me or something? Or?
No. I saw the spirited conversation you had with.
Yeah, we kind of came to some arrangement on Twitter, I think, didn't we?
Yeah, I think you did in the end. Yeah.
It's another one, isn't it? That it seems to divide people as well.
Sure does.
Yeah, I've got to go back and have a look at it too, because I quite frankly don't see what the criticism's all about. But
it's the classic case of people judging the experience. If you
it's too windy, mate. It's always windy down there.
But if you put
Ranfurly's
holes at New South Wales, which is infinitely more windy than Ranfurly is, it would be ranked where New South Wales is.
Well, if you put it anywhere near the ocean.
Yeah. And if you put New South Wales's holes at Ranfurly, it wouldn't be ranked as highly because there are some awful holes at New South Wales, I think.
Here's a question for you, Clates. If Royal Melbourne East was anywhere else in Australia bar next to Royal Melbourne West, would it edge higher in the ranking?
Yeah. Well, where is it now? 8, 5, 6, 4?
I think it's slipped to 7.
I think it's the equal of Kingston Heath. Yeah. So I think absolutely. I think it suffers in comparison to.
Which you find elsewhere in the world. Like if you go to the new course at St Andrews, people want to go there and play the old course, and then they can't get on, so they go and play the new course, and they come off and go, "Wow, how good was that?"
Really good. Yeah. The trick of a 36-hole complex is to have 2 courses where if you had a 10-round split, you would pick 5 and 5, or maybe 6 and 4. But Royal Melbourne, if you had a 10-round split at Royal Melbourne, you're always going to play 7 on the west and 3 on the east. But if the east course in Kingston Heath were a 36-hole complex, you'd play 5 and 5. So it's only because that the west course is so great that the east course suffers a bit. But that's a fantastic course.
I think we could spend 15 minutes on every course in the top 100 and then probably another 15 minutes on the 50 courses that aren't in the top 100. I just heard somebody's alarm beep over there, Hazy, and I think that means that the bacon and eggs is now being served at Metro. So unless you boys get there pretty quickly, you're going to be playing your game of golf on empty stomachs. And I know for you, James, that's not a palatable thought whatsoever. So Brendan James from Golf Australia and Steve Cotton from Golf. No, my pleasure. Anytime, Steve Cotton from Golf Digest. Thanks for coming in, boys. Honestly, for blokes like Hazy and I, and I'm sure for thousands of people listening, we could have this conversation run for another couple of hours and still want more at the end of it. Thanks for making yourselves available early in the morning and
no problem.
being part of the show.
I enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Good on you. And Clates,
Thanks, mate.
see you later. We'll see you next time.
I will.
Good on you. More on Inside the Ropes after this.
Hi, this is Sherelle McMahon. Swing Fit is the fun, healthy, social way for women to get started in golf. You'll learn the basics of the golf swing and how to putt over a 6-week program and get your whole body moving through yoga and Pilates style exercises. You don't need any golf knowledge or equipment. Simply turn up in comfy clothing and get started. You'll be surrounded by like-minded people and receive constant support. So get outdoors, meet new friends and learn a sport that you can play for the rest of your life. To find a program near you, visit swingfit.com.au.
Hey, it's Jeff Ogilvy. I can't be in Australia very often, but I love keeping up with everything on Inside the Ropes podcast. Good bunch of guys, and I love listening.
Welcome back to the show. Not much more to work our way through, although we do need to cross over to the States because one of our great panellists, of course, and co-Inside the Ropers is Stacey Peters, who is over at the States as we speak and on course, taking in the NCAA National Championships, which mightn't mean much to a lot of Australian golf fans, Hazy, but over in the States is huge.
It is massive. And, we all know the NCAA basketball tournaments, both men's and women's, and this is the golfing equivalent that Stacey's at. It's a bit off Broadway, collegiate golf for a lot of Australian golf fans, but we talked about the depth, particularly in the women's game recently at amateur level. Probably we should take the blinkers off a little bit and look a bit broader because we have got 5 or 6 girls who are doing great things over there in the United States who we just don't recognise as often as we should.
And haven't spoken about pathways into big tours with Clates in the opening segment of the show. This is absolutely a way for a lot of young Australians to lever their way, into the sort of the upper ranks of golf in America. And as I said, Stacey Peters is out on course right now, and she's watching an Australian duke it out, as they say over in the States right now. Hi, Stace.
Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks for getting in touch again.
Tell us what it is. For those who don't know what this NCAA National Championships is all about, fill us in.
Yeah, so these guys that are playing here, or these girls, sorry, have qualified from their regional championships. And it's a teams event, 5-person teams. They play 54 holes of stroke play. The top 15 teams get to play another 18 holes for the qualifying. And then that goes into top 8, go into match play knockout then. So I mean, it's massive for the colleges over here. I guess I've heard a lot about it, but I haven't seen it. And, it's so different when you see it firsthand. And I guess we just thought that, what a great opportunity. We've got 5 Aussie girls playing over here. We've got 2 at Colorado, Robin Choi and Kirsty Hodgkins. Obviously, Gabby, who's still in now, Gabby Ruffles, playing at USC. Then we've got Julian Sue at Oklahoma. And then Hira Naveed, she qualified as an individual, actually. You can also, if your team doesn't qualify yet, your individual score is good enough, you get to come as well. So she's from Pepperdine. She qualified as well. So, yeah, it's awesome. It's been great to see these girls who we don't get to see that much. So it's kind of cool that they're in the one place at one time, so it was a great opportunity for me to come, I guess obviously learn about the college system as well, but meet their coaches, meet their teammates, and yeah, it's been an awesome few days actually.
And Stacey,
really good.
Do they get the feeling that when you're there that, that everyone is looking and paying attention and actually, following their progress?
Yeah, well, that's the comments actually I've had from some of the girls. They're like, it's really nice. Like we haven't just, left Australia and been forgotten about. And I think that's really important. Like it's just another pathway. It's just another option. And it's kind of cool to see the girls, they're so busy, like studying and then, trying to do their practice, going away for tournaments, studying while they're on the road. And, I love that. I think it's awesome. I think, it's just another pathway. So, yeah, it's been great to see.
Well, we don't need an expose on each of them, but I'd be really interested in your thoughts on each of the 5 girls as you've seen them and how they're progressing generally. The last time we saw Robin Choi and Kirsty Hodgkins for any regularity was probably when Queensland were winning the Interstate Series a couple of years ago, and they went off obviously in great form. They've been playing well for Colorado. How did you see them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's been good. Obviously, the college system, it's quite different. It's not. They don't have the coaches as such. They're more teaching them about how to get the ball, in the hole, about golfing. It's just a different system, a different pathway. But I think these girls are progressing along nicely, and mixtures like the girls. Some of them keep in touch with still work with their coach at home. Some have a coach over here. Some do a bit of both. Very individual. But yeah, I see the girls just progressing along quite nicely. So
when you see something, you're sort of out there watching Gabby Ruffles right now. When you watch her game as it sits, on the 23rd of May, compared to when you saw her kind of 12 months ago, Stace, do you see a better golfer?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Especially they are playing such good competition week in, week out, like with their college, their college matches. They're playing really tough golf courses. That's another thing that's been great to see this week. You might see some of the scores that they've shot, and they've had, 71, 75, 70. Honestly, anything under par on this golf course is a great score. It's such a tough golf course. So they're playing these type of golf courses all the time. And so I think that is going to bring out the best, eventually, that's going to bring out the best in them. And so I see, and Gabby, she's such a competitor. So I see big improvements with her.
Great. And they're playing Andy at Carston Creek, which is Oklahoma State University's own facility. It's sort of hard to comprehend.
It really is.
The amenities that these universities have. What's it like, Stace? I mean, can you, for someone who's, grown up in Cressy in rural Victoria, it must be hard to sort of comprehend.
Yeah, we don't have these facilities in Cressy. I mean, similar, but not. I was lucky. I got a tour around the facility actually this morning, and I jumped at it when they offered it to me. I was like, yeah, great, So he kind of drove me around all the facility, and it is world class. Like all, total short game area that is, and it is specifically for the university kids. Like it is, they have some members here, but I was talking to one of the members, and he said, yeah, but we're kind of like third class citizens here.
Unreal.
Like we're not allowed on at certain times, and like university is absolute number one, and they own the course because they want to be able to use it when they want. And yeah, it's just the facilities are awesome. There's not a whole lot around this area. It's I can see why they've produced a lot of good golfers, because all I'd be doing here is practicing and working out, and there's not a whole lot else to do.
It's not possible, is it, Stace? Listening to you discuss this, and this is just the devil's advocate hat you put on. Can it teach them not bad habits, but can it lure them into a false sense of reality? In that, this is not the way it is, as you very well know. This is not the way it is everywhere else.
Yeah, a little bit, I think. Like, I've spoke to a lot of parents this week as well. I've done a lot of talking this week, as you can tell. I've spoke to a lot of parents. Do you find that hard to believe, guys?
It's staggering.
And I was talking to a lot of the parents, and they're like, we have tried to drill into them that, these 4 years are the best years ever. They get spoiled rotten. They get everything they want. They get all the clothing, all the equipment. They get all the travel, totally everything, free ride. So that side of it, it can have its disadvantages, but I think the pros, I think there's more benefits.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I will let you get back out there. Gabby Ruffles' team's doing hard. They've lost the first couple of matches. They're 2 down through 15 in the third match. They're in front in the fourth, and Gabby's all square through 13 in her fifth match for Southern California. Is that
USC? Yeah.
USC, yeah.
USC, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll
for that team. It's a really young team. This is the.
There you go. That's what happens, isn't it? International lines. Occasionally, a gremlin bobs up. We haven't cut her off because she's just talking too much. The line is just dead set dropped out halfway through that. I think she's going to say they're a really young team, and for USC, this is a great result to get as far into the tournament as they have.
Well,
So,
Anna Maria Ruffles, who's the mother of both Gabby and Ryan, she's a great Twitter correspondent, and she's fantastic. And so you can sort of follow along with her. They've put up pictures of the USC girls, and they're just babes, and I mean that not in a
like
real
little people,
sort of sense.
young
Little
people.
people.
Yeah.
They're going to be a force, and you can only imagine that's going to be an awesome experience in the next 3 to 4 years as they go their separate ways and tours, etc. If they come out of college early, but for the next 3 or 4 years, Gabby's going to be party to an experience that she couldn't buy here. So, you do forego a lot of things when you leave Australia. That stands to reason. But all the 5 girls that we mentioned there, Hira, Julianne, Robin, and Kirsty, and of course Gabby, they left Australia getting towards the top of the amateur totem pole. And just because they're not on our radar every week doesn't mean they're still not doing their thing. And they're going to be good professionals, at least a couple of them. So, they're names we need to sort of tuck away and remember.
And you know what? If this is where their golf took them to, a stage of their life where they're at now, experiencing the sort of stuff that, Stacey's just been telling us about, then what a journey golf's already taken them on, memories and friendships they'll make and a love of the game. There's no guarantees, obviously, but gee, it sounds like it would be. There'll be a lot of people listening to this right now who would be saying, if I knew about this when I was 10, 11, 12, that this could have been a possibility. And it was a possibility. Guys like Steve Elkington, it wasn't the done thing, but there were a lot of it. There were some Australians who were aware of the college system back in the sort of 70s who got over there and did it.
Yeah.
I'd be listening to this now as a kid going, hey, Dad, can I go and do what they're doing?
Yeah. And absolutely. And as you just pointed out, I mean, the lure, if you're smart enough to realise that you're not going to be in the top 300 to 400 in the world, as we were talking about with Clates way earlier, then being in the NCAA system, you can fall back on a really good educational backstop, and that's going to leave you in good stead anyhow. So, it's a chance to test your mettle against your peers who will be your pro peers if you go that way, and if you're not that good, which hopefully none of these girls are going to fall into that category, but if you realise that, what a great place to have as a fallback.
We need to apologise to several Inside the Ropers because we didn't get to their questions with Jamesy and Steve in the previous 50 minutes or so prior to the other ad break, talking about the top 100s. We had several questions come through. Hopefully, at some stage of the conversation, you felt like your points had been addressed. If they weren't, we really apologise and appreciate you sending them through. Don't forget, you can subscribe to Inside the Ropes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. We did get another couple of 5-star ratings this week, Hazy. You're our man when it comes to acknowledging the 5-star raters.
I am. My favourite rating that I've ever got, Andy, in this thing, there's been plenty. And it was my favourite just for its simplicity to be able to read out. From RBM60. Great.
That's perfect.
That's my favourite one ever because it's so hard to, self-congratulate as we continue to do.
Correct.
And the other one I'm having trouble reading here, Andy,
Yeah,
from Graham Voss.
Yeah, I got it. He says, Vossi's written a bit here. Always have the alarm set for 6 a.m. Saturday morning as a means to start my preparation for the day ahead. And, of course, that means my major golf day of the week. Aussie content is a winner on your show. I urge more interviews, local and offshore. Golf Vic participation would be a great enhancement, especially outlining pennant and other leading local amateur events. My assessment would be a majority of your listeners are golf nuts. Don't change a thing and keep up the good work. Love your work. Regards, Vossi. Vossi, we can say that Golf Victoria do a power of work helping us get this podcast to air and out into the public domain every single week. Greg Oakford and Justin Felt, the team down there, just do a super job.
They really do. We'd love to do more on the local pennant front in particular, but it's problematic to do it all around Australia, so we apologise for that. It's probably not going to happen. We don't want to lie to you, but Point taken.
Indeed. You need to go and hit the golf ball around Metro.
Yeah.
Hopefully
My
Jamesy's left some egg and bacon rolls behind for you.
I don't think that's
possible. Thanks. It's been an early start to the day. We'll go and have a cup of coffee and a little lie down. The rest of us, Hazy, go hit them long and straight. Thanks for coming in again.
Murray.
Mark Hayes, Golf Australia Media Manager, co-host of this show. It's been Andy Maher. Thanks for tuning in again, folks. Back to do it all again next week.